New Japan. I love New Japan. It's an interesting place where people go and they hone their skills and they get better. It doesn't matter if they leave TNA, WWE, and quite frankly nowadays, I think AEW stars that will go to New Japan will come back better. Of course, right now I'm talking about Jack Perry, Jungle Boy, but that remains to be seen. But this video isn't about that. This video is about the New Japan Cup 2024. We're at the quarterfinals now, so things are going to become interesting because we live in interesting times, especially in the world of professional wrestling. So let's look at, should we go to round 1 and let's see, let's go to round 1 and we'll move on from there. Yoshihashi pins Kenta. Jack Perry pins Shota Umino. Toru Yano defeats Yujihiro Takahashi. David Finlay pins TJP. Tongaloa pins Great Okan. Unfortunately, I know. Chase Owens beats Tomohiro Ishii. Moving on to the next bracket, Hikuleo pins Oleg Boltin. Shingo Takagi pins Yuya Uemura. Gabe Kidd pins Callum Newman. Yota Tsuji pins Jeff Cobb. El Fantasmo pins Mikey Nicholas. And Ren Narita pins Taichi. So it's pretty interesting. Let's look at round 2. Sanada pins Yoshihashi. Jack Perry pins Toru Yano. David Finlay pins Tangaloa. Hiroki Goto pins Chase Owens. Evo pins Hikuleo. Shingo Takagi pins Gabe Kidd. Yota Tsuji pins El Fantasmo and Ren Narita pins Jack Sabre Jr. Which means that at this point that we're in right now, we're gonna have Sanada versus Jack Perry, David Finlay versus Hiroki Goto, Evo versus Shingo Takagi, and Yota Tsuji against Ren Narita. I always mess his name up, but I mess most Japanese names up. Doesn't matter. And here's just, let's call it my prediction video. This is my prediction video because here's what I think will happen. I think that Sanada will beat and will pin Jack Perry. No doubt about that. And I think it's pretty much clear that David Finlay will pin Hiroki Goto. But what happens next is interesting because I think Evo is going down the road. Shingo Takagi loses. And then Ren Narita wins. And so we have one semifinal that has Sanada against David Finlay and Evo versus Ren Narita, which basically cements Evo to go to the finals. And then you can play it two ways. You can either have Sanada beat David Finlay and then have a former Los Ingobernables fight and match where you have Sanada win and then he gets his rematch against Naito as Sakura Genesis, or you can have Evo win. And if you have Evo win, well, that's a pretty good point to build him up. And that's one of the two ways this New Japan Cup can go. But I have another proposal, a third option, an ace in the hole. David Finlay wins, and we get an Evo versus David Finlay match. Now this is interesting because you have the House of Torture, which has been quite separate, much like the Codyverse. It exists kind of in its own universe, separated from the Bullet Club. And it would be interesting to have the main Bullet Club against House of Torture and having them fight each other. Maybe even this be the moment that the House of Torture splits off from Bullet Club, which is interesting in my opinion. We have to understand that the House of Torture is viewed separately. When it comes to Japanese wrestling, the Japanese people really like them. They like the House of Torture, and I can understand why. There is a certain appeal to them. But wrestling fans in mostly America hate the House of Torture. Mostly because I think they hate the idea of constant interferences, constantly messing in matches and so on. And it kind of reminds them of the Bloodline storyline, which is one of the best storylines we have out there, but that's a different story. Now, all three of these options are pretty interesting. You can get the former Los Ingobernables match where no matter who wins, a former member is going to fight Naito as Sakura Genesis. Or you get David Finlay into the mix and build him as this heel gaijin that he's technically supposed to be, and, well, Nick Nimitz stole that from him, but it doesn't matter. You can build him up there and do a split off with the House of Torture and change them. Imagine this, a David Finlay match against Evil, and you have interferences from the Bullet Club and the House of Torture, and they just split up. Or even better, they don't split up. They have interferences, they beat each other up, they have their members beat each other up, the Bullet Club War Dogs and the House of Torture and so on, and then at the end, they make peace. Because it's still the Bullet Club. And I think that's a pretty neat idea. It's also time to build David Finlay up for this gaijin role that he now has to fill with Will Ospreay gone. So I think that's a pretty interesting story that we can tell with that. And it's something interesting that we would get out of it. There's also this idea that David Finlay has to fill big shoes. What Jay White did for Bullet Club in New Japan, oh boy, that's a lot of work that needs to be done to reach that point. That's a lot of work on the Irishman's head. But hey, the Bullet Club is led by an Irishman again. So we will see where it goes from here on out. But I think it's very interesting that no matter who wins, be it Sanada, be it Evil, be it David Finlay, there's an amazing story that you can tell with that. Sanada already cemented himself once he won the first time, and quite frankly, it was a long time coming since they pulled that trigger. Evil did have his run with the world title of New Japan, and he's proven to be quite like Adam Page when it comes to being a world champion, which is a better chaser than a holder, that is. And still, there's David Finlay, who still has to prove himself. So no matter who goes and wins the finals, there's still an amazing story to tell there. And now, personally, I think it's going to be interesting. I really think it's going to be interesting how it evolves and where it goes. I don't have my money on anything because all three options would be amazing. But there's another one I thought well about, and that's Shingo Takagi winning. Now, Shingo Takagi winning would be interesting because Shingo Takagi is still a member of Los Ingobernables. And that can create more tension in the stable. But I don't think, I can't remember the acronym. I don't think they need more tension in that stable. I think it will be better to hold together against a threat that has the numbers advantage. Be it Evil or David Finlay. And I think that's way better. But Shingo Takagi winning, that would be amazing too. Though I doubt it. I think it's one of these three. Sanada, Finlay, or Evil. And no matter who wins at the end, hey, as wrestling fans, we still win.